You wake up in a room that smells like wet wool, smoke, and regret. It's dark. Not romantic candlelight dark, more like someone boarded up the windows and threw you in a cellar dark. You're not in a cozy Airbnb or even a questionable hostel in Prague. No, you're in a medieval manor house. Or maybe it's a castle. Or maybe it's just a glorified barn with delusions of grandeur. Either way, you're a servant. And it's the year 1348. Let that sink in for a second. You are a servant. You don't have rights. You don't have options. You don't even have your own name half the time, just a nickname based on your job or your least flattering physical feature. Congratulations, Red Nose, you're on turnip mashing duty today. Again. The mattress beneath you is not really a mattress, unless your idea of comfort is a burlap sack filled with straw and possibly a few rodents who pay no rent and chew loudly through the night. Your pillow? It's your arm. Your blanket? Also your arm, plus maybe a mildewed rag if your master is feeling generous or drunk. Or both. The morning air is cold. You know it's morning not because there's any sunlight. This room hasn't seen a ray of light since the Norman conquest, but because someone just kicked you in the side and yelled up in a tone that suggests you have 3.7 seconds to live if you don't start moving. So before you roll over and try to go back to sleep, do me a favor. Take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Seriously, I'm not your lord. I can't conscript you into my YouTube army. But if this weird, sleepy blend of sarcasm and historical despair helps you unwind at 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I'm always weirdly fascinated by that. Now then, let's go back to the Middle Ages. You're not a knight. You're not a noble. You're not even a well-fed pig. You're a domestic servant. That means your entire life revolves around doing things for someone else. Cooking, cleaning, mucking out the chamber pot, which, in case you're wondering, is just a fancy name for a medieval bucket of human misery. And unlike the bucket, your boss doesn't get emptied out once a day. He just festers. You drag yourself out of bed, or rather, off the pile of straw mites, and shuffle toward your first task of the day, helping your master get dressed. Because apparently putting on one's own hose and tunic is a burden too great for those born into privilege. The garments are scratchy, layered, and smell like a combination of wet animal, wood smoke, and centuries of entitlement. As you lace up his doublet, he complains about his gout and mumbles something about the wine being too warm last night. You nod and mumble, even though you couldn't afford wine unless you sold a kidney. And kidneys, back then, were not highly valued on the open market. After dressing Lord Flammable Gasbag, or whatever his name is, you make your way downstairs to the kitchen. The kitchen, if you're lucky, is in a separate building, because medieval kitchens have an exciting tendency to burst into flames. But today you're in one of the old keeps, where fire safety consists of praying it doesn't happen. The cook is already there, yelling about the bread being flat and the meat being stolen. You don't ask questions. The meat probably wasn't meat anyway. Maybe pigeon. Maybe rat. Maybe that weird, hairless thing someone found in the cellar. If you're really unlucky, it's eel pie day. That's not a joke. Eel pie was a thing. A deeply unfortunate, slimy, protein-rich thing. Your job is to chop vegetables with a knife so dull it couldn't cut warm butter. There are no cutting boards. You just do it on a wooden table that hasn't been cleaned since the Magna Carta was signed. Every surface is sticky. You don't ask why. You don't want to know. Once breakfast is served, you help carry the platters up to the Great Hall, where your noble betters sit around pretending to be important while eating boiled things with their fingers. There's no silverware unless you're extremely rich or extremely foreign. Just hands. Greasy, calloused, unwashed hands. You're not allowed to eat until after they're done, and by then the food looks like it's been licked by a dog and sneezed on by history. But you smile and eat it anyway. Why? Because you're not dead. That's the bar. That's the medieval standard for a good day, still breathing, still chewing, no visible plague boils. Speaking of the plague, yes, it's here. It's always here. It's the 1300s. You don't know it's the plague, of course. You just know that Thomas the scullery boy started sneezing yesterday, and now he's a corpse in the garden. No one talks about it. No one asks. If you say the word plague, people think you're summoning it, like some kind of filthy medieval Beetlejuice. So instead, you just step over Thomas, offer a vague prayer, and go about your day. After the meal, you're sent to clean the privy. Now, let's talk about medieval toilets. Imagine the worst outhouse you've ever encountered. Now remove the plastic walls, add some sharp rocks, and place it directly over a pit full of centuries-old human waste. That's your job today. You get to lower yourself down on a rope, yes, a rope, and shovel out what is essentially ancient sewage soup. And there's no mask, no gloves, no hope, just you, the stink, and a profound sense of existential regret. Once you're done with that nightmare, you haul buckets of water from the well. The well is 200 yards away. The buckets weigh more than your hopes and dreams. Your shoes are not waterproof. In fact, they're barely shoes. More like leather encouragements. The manor house itself is not heated. There are fireplaces, yes, but they're reserved for the family. You get the hallway drafts and the radiant warmth of your own slow hypothermia. In winter, your hands freeze to the bucket handles. In summer, the air smells like livestock and failure. Your only form of entertainment is gossip. And not good gossip, either. Just endless whispered rumors about who got caught sneaking into whose hayloft and whether or not the miller's apprentice is secretly a warlock. Spoiler, he isn't. He just has weird eyebrows. As a servant, your free time is limited to the moments when no one's looking directly at you. You might sneak off to the corner of the yard to sit for 5 minutes. Maybe you carve your initials into a fence post. Maybe you fantasize about running away to join a monastery where they at least feed you before making you copy Latin by candlelight until your eyes bleed. But mostly, you work. You sweep, scrub, wash, carry, fetch, lift, polish, and endure. There are no sick days. No weekends. No mental health breaks. If you're too ill to stand, you lie on the floor and hope no one steps on you while they demand more mead. The lady of the house is no better. She's not cruel, exactly, just oblivious in a way only inherited wealth can breed. She thinks your name is girl or you there. She asks for hot water for her bath and then complains it isn't hot enough. You try not to remind her that you heated it by carrying it in iron pots across the courtyard and that your eyebrows caught fire twice in the process. Her bath water is fragrant. She has herbs and oils and luxury things like soap. You, on the other hand, get to bathe once a month in a communal barrel that smells like everyone who used it before you, plus one dead fish. At night, you finally get to collapse back onto your straw pile. Your body aches. Your feet are swollen. You smell like smoke, sweat, and sadness. You stare at the wooden beams above your head and listen to the rats scurrying across them. You name the rats. They are your friends now. Gerald, the bold one. Esmeralda, who bites toes. You think, briefly, about the stories you heard as a child, knights, quests, magical forests. Then you cough, turn over, and dream about a better life. Maybe in another century. Maybe one with anesthesia and cheese that isn't blue on purpose. Outside, the wind howls. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. It's probably barking at nothing. Or maybe at Gerald. He's getting bolder. And so ends your first day as a medieval servant. Congratulations. You've survived. Barely. And you get to do it all again tomorrow. Unless the plague gets you first. Sleep tight. You wake up again. Which is both a blessing and a curse. Your mouth tastes like old iron and damp bread. Your back is one with the straw-stuffed mat beneath you, and your legs have collectively decided that movement is an outrageous request. But you stir anyway, because you have no choice. The rooster is crowing again, like a feathery alarm clock with rage issues. And someone is shouting your name from a courtyard. Or at least the name they've given you, Barn Rat or Short John or possibly just Oi. You blink at the low ceiling. Dust floats through a sliver of gray light, suspended like the ghosts of past complaints. It's time for another exciting day as a servant in the medieval machine of barely functional society. But today isn't just about you. Today, we meet your coworkers. Spoiler alert, none of them are happy either. Let's start in the kitchens. A place of fire, yelling, and creative interpretations of meat. The lowest on the culinary totem pole is the scullery boy, or girl. Gender was less relevant than availability, especially when it came to endless drudgery. The scullery worker's job is to clean everything. Dishes, pots, Surfaces. Knives. Cutting boards that are really just stained hunks of wood. And by clean, we mean scrub with ashes and cold water until your fingers bleed. Soap exists, but it's more theoretical than practical and mostly reserved for the rich. So you make do with sand, spit, and vigorous cursing. Scullery servants are the first to arrive and the last to leave. They sleep on the floor, near the hearth if they're lucky, or in the cellar with the spiders if they're not. They eat last. They bathe, eventually. And they are yelled at constantly by the cook, who runs the kitchen like a slightly deranged general. The cook, by contrast, has power. The cook can ruin you, or feed you, or both. They command the kitchen with a wooden spoon and the dead-eyed stare of someone who's boiled too many questionable animals. They also know all the gossip, every scandal, every midnight rendezvous, every noble's embarrassing digestive incident. The kitchen is the nervous system of the manor, and the cook is its cranky, over-caffeinated brain. Moving on, we find the spit boy. The spit boy's job is, brace yourself, to sit beside an open fire and manually turn a massive iron spit that roasts entire animals. 4 hours. In the summer. In the heat. In a room that already feels like the inside of a volcano. Their face gets so scorched they often lose their eyebrows by age 12. If you think this sounds like a job that would eventually be replaced by a machine, congratulations, you're smarter than the 14th century. Of course, not all servant work involved food. Some servants got to work with animals instead. Which sounds cute until you remember this is the Middle Ages. Working with animals means shoveling waste, dodging kicks, and trying not to get trampled by a noble's warhorse who has more rights than you do. There's the stable hand, who sleeps in the hayloft and smells like he was born inside a damp saddle. His job is to brush horses, clean hooves, and remove things from the barn floor that should never, ever be stepped on barefoot. Which he does anyway. Because shoes are optional when you earn 3 turnips a year and a pat on the head. Then there's the dairymaid. The dairymaid is up before everyone else, milking cows that don't care about your personal boundaries and sometimes kick you just for sport. The milk is heavy, the churn is exhausting, and the smell is eternal. You reek of sour milk for the rest of your natural life. And if the cheese turns out weird, guess whose fault it is? Yep, yours. Obviously. Not the mold. Not the weather. Not the cow's weird diet. Just you. Perhaps you're lucky enough to work in the Lord's household as a personal attendant. Maybe a chambermaid. Sounds fancy, right? You wear a slightly cleaner tunic and stay indoors most of the time. But your job is to clean the chamber. Which, let's be clear, is a nice word for where all the bodily functions happen. Bed sheets that haven't been washed in months? Yours to change. Chamber pots full of fermented despair? Yours to carry. Unexpected messes left by nobility with delicate stomachs. Oh, you're on that too. And heaven help you if you break something. A broken goblet could get you docked wages. A broken vase might cost you your position. Break wind in front of the wrong noble, and you might find yourself reassigned to latrine duty. Indefinitely. Let's not forget the wet nurse. Now, this one is special. A wet nurse is a woman hired specifically to breastfeed the noble's baby. Why? Because noble women don't want to ruin their figures or be mildly inconvenienced by their own offspring. So they pay someone else to do it. And by pay, we mean offer a place to sleep and 2 extra pieces of bread per week. The wet nurse is required to have just had a baby herself, ideally one she doesn't mind feeding less, because the noble baby takes priority. That's right. You're expected to nourish someone else's heir while your own child gnaws on dry crusts and cries softly in the corner. There's also the reeve, who is not technically a servant, but sort of a farm manager. The reeve is like a middle manager who lives to make your life worse. They track how much grain was harvested, how many chickens mysteriously vanished, and whether or not you spent too long talking instead of threshing. Everyone hates the reeve. Even the reeve hates the reeve. But they wield petty power, which in medieval terms is the most dangerous kind. Now, perhaps you're a footman. You're tall, good-looking, and physically fit. Because footmen are basically human furniture. You stand beside doors. You carry heavy things. You run messages. You open carriages, except there are no cars. So really, you're just opening wooden boxes on wheels pulled by malnourished horses. Sometimes you accompany your lord to town, where people assume you're rich because of your clothes, until you open your mouth and reveal your job is to carry soup bowls and absorb blame. Oh, and let's not forget the jester. The jester is technically not a servant in the traditional sense, but don't be fooled by the hat with bells on it. The jester lives to amuse the Lord in his court. That means telling jokes, singing songs, possibly juggling, and definitely humiliating yourself on command. You're allowed to say things others can't, like "my lord is a pompous toad," but only because everyone thinks you're too foolish to take seriously. Step out of line, though, and you'll be whipped faster than you can say court-sanctioned sarcasm. All of these jobs come with their own fun little additions: fleas, lice, back pain, unpaid overtime, and a casual awareness that your entire life is disposable. And while the manor house seems like the epicenter of all this activity, let's not forget the castle servants. Ah yes, castles. Cold, damp, stone, infested with drafty hallways and political intrigue. Castles require a lot of servants. You have pages, young boys in training to become knights, which means they serve food, clean armor, hold helmets, and get yelled at by actual knights. Some eventually get promoted. Others die of trench foot and are replaced by cousins. You have grooms for the horses, laundresses for the linens, and torchbearers who stand in corners holding literal fire for hours at a time because some duke wanted ambience. No pressure. Just don't drop it and burn the whole place down. Then there are the washerwomen. These heroic figures wash clothing in freezing rivers using a combination of lye, elbow grease, and the power of sheer spite. They beat garments against rocks, boil linens in cauldrons, and somehow get blamed when your lord's tunic turns slightly pink. If you're wondering where the soap is, there's some, but it's made with animal fat and lye, smells like despair, and burns your skin. Enjoy. Even castles had rat catchers. You think you had a bad job? Imagine being paid to crawl into the walls with a stick and a bag and deal with rats. And not cute Disney rats, either. These are plaguey, furious, sewer-dwelling goblins with tails. And if they bite you, well, hopefully, you weren't that attached to your fingers. Yet, in spite of all this, servant life wasn't always 100% awful. Maybe 98%. But every now and then, there were scraps of joy. Like feast days when you got leftovers that still had some meat. Or village festivals where people danced badly and drank worse. Or that one time the Lord accidentally fell off his horse in front of everyone, and you were allowed to laugh because he was too drunk to remember it the next day. You built quiet friendships. Shared stolen pastries behind the stable. Whispered secrets under moonlight. Took pride in perfectly scrubbed floors. Cried when the barley harvest didn't fail. Smiled when the baby you fed finally giggled. Maybe even fell in love with the cooper's apprentice, who promised you a better life in the next village over. Spoiler, he was lying. He has 3 kids and a goat wife. Still, you held on. Because what else was there? And so, as you end another day wiping soot from your face and hay from your shirt, you wonder, what would it be like to live in a time when your worth wasn't measured in how fast you could clean a goblet? Maybe tomorrow. For now, you curl up on your sack of straw. Gerald the rat curls beside you. There's peace in its own way. You're bone-tired, sore, a little broken, but alive. Good night, servant. Sleep well. You've earned it. You wake up with a cough. It's cold, but not the kind of cold where you can see your breath and Instagram it. This is the kind of cold where your teeth hurt, where the inside of your nose feels like broken glass, where you briefly wonder if you've frozen to death but forgot to notice. It's January, or maybe February. You don't actually know, because you don't own a calendar. Time is measured in church feasts, grain levels, and how many chilblains you have on your toes. You wrap yourself tighter in the one blanket you share with your brother, your cousin, and possibly a chicken named Agnes. The floor is frozen. Your tunic smells like old onions. And somewhere in the courtyard, a rooster is again auditioning for the role of most hated thing in a 10-mile radius. Welcome to winter on a medieval estate. You are a servant, and you're cold. Let's walk through the year, month by month. Slowly, regretfully, soothingly, sarcastically. Because what is time, if not a long list of minor sufferings? January. You're hauling firewood. The Lord and Lady are cozy upstairs, near the hearth, drinking something warm that smells like apples and classism. You, meanwhile, are dragging logs through 3 inches of slush. Your boots, well, boots is generous. You have sacks with string. Your toes have lost all sensation. You're 97% sure one of them is just gone now. Rest in peace, left-toe. Meals are thin this time of year. The stores are dwindling. No one's harvesting anything. The salted meat tastes like betrayal, and the barley porridge is mostly water and regret. You dream of spring, when food grows again. You also dream of being a goose. They seem to have it figured out. February. Still winter. Still awful. You're mending things. Cloaks, thatch roofs, fences, your will to live. The snow is turning gray and sad, much like your mood. Everyone in the manor house is a little more irritable than usual. Tempers are short. Fingers are chapped. The cook screamed at you for breathing too loudly next to the turnips. You consider running away. But to where? The next village? That's 6 miles of ice, wolves, and people who definitely won't feed you. So you stay. And you sew. And you hope the sun returns before your fingers snap off like old carrots. March. The first crocuses bloom. Which sounds romantic. In reality, it means one thing, muck. The thaw has begun. Snow melts into slush. Slush mixes with manure. The whole world smells like wet sheep. The paths become rivers of filth. You lose a shoe. Or maybe the shoe loses you. Either way, you're now ankle-deep in a medieval milkshake of mud, dung, and broken promises. But something's happening. The days are longer. A little less bleak. You see a bee. You cry. Because it's planting season. April. Welcome to the Agricultural Olympics. You're out in the fields. Every single day. The reeve has a list. You are on it. You dig trenches, scatter seed, chase off crows, and pray to saints you've never heard of. Rain falls sideways. The wind tries to remove your ears. Your back feels like it's been personally cursed by God. But you plant. Because if you don't, there is no harvest. And if there is no harvest, you eat your belt. On Sundays, you rest. Technically. Which really means you do less work, not no work. The priest reminds you that suffering is holy. You fantasize about smacking him with a hoe. May. Finally. A flower. It's beautiful. Vibrant. You smile. Then a goat eats it. The manor comes to life. Trees bloom. Lambs bleat. People start bathing again. Once. Maybe. If someone dies and they need to impress guests. You spend your days weeding, herding, spinning, and remembering what sunshine feels like. The nobles are out hunting. You're inside, plucking geese and wondering why every feather feels like a personal attack. Still, May brings Beltane. A festival. A fire. People dancing badly in the moonlight. You get a sweet cake and 1 cup of mead. You pretend it's happiness. It's nice. Then you return to work. June. Summer. Glorious, sweaty, exhausting summer. The sun rises early. So do you. Your entire day is fields. You hoe. You reap. You cut hay with a tool so dull it may as well be a spoon. Your hands develop blisters. Your blisters get blisters. You smell like earth and onions and warm leather. Which wouldn't be bad if it weren't also your skin. Your reward for a long day's work? Half a radish. Maybe 2, if the steward isn't watching. You nap under a tree. For 3 minutes. Before someone yells at you to get back to work. July. Harvest prep begins. You sharpen tools. Or at least pretend to. The scythe has a crack. The rake is missing half its teeth. It's fine. You'll figure it out with brute force and prayer. Flies are everywhere. You swat them constantly. They don't care. They've decided you're their new god. Your skin is sunburned. Your brain is fried. You stare at the sky and wonder if clouds used to be better. The good news? The barley looks strong. The bad news? So does the tax collector. He's already lurking, like a pale mushroom, ready to take his share. August. Hell month. Harvest time. You rise before dawn. You don't stop. You work until your arms feel like wet rope. Everyone is in the fields. Even the reeve. Which tells you how serious this is. You cut, bind, carry, store, stack, and sweat. The heat is unbearable. You hallucinate a duck in a waistcoat. You ask it for help. It does not reply. By the end of the month, The harvest is in. The grain is stored. The reef says it's acceptable. You lie down in a pile of straw and weak. Someone tells you it's St. Bartholomew's Day. You can't remember who he is, but you toast him anyway with a thimble of cider and a dry crust of dignity. September. You thought it was over. You fool. Now it's threshing. You take a flail, a medieval tool that looks like a nunchuck made of wood, and beat the grain out of the stalks. 4 hours. Days. Weeks. It's dusty. Loud. Your arms ache. Your nose bleeds. You are covered in bits of husk and shame. On Sundays, you help with brewing. The ale must be made. The barley must ferment. You sample it and immediately regret your choices. The air turns cool. The nights lengthen. You blink and realize autumn has arrived. October. Things are slowing down. You harvest apples, nuts, root vegetables. You prepare the animals for slaughter. You try not to get attached. You fail. You name a pig Gregory and cry when he becomes sausage. The manor hosts a feast. You watch from the shadows, chewing on a crust and pretending it's roast duck. You sweep leaves, stack firewood, patch roofs, prepare for the inevitable bone-snapping cold. A priest gives a sermon on humility. You consider turning it into a drinking game, 1 sip every time he says piety. You'd be drunk in 5 minutes. November. The cold returns. The firewood disappears faster than you can chop it. Your hands are cracked. Your lips bleed. Your joints ache. There's a feast for all saints. You are not invited. But you sneak a honey cake when no one's looking. It is, without question, the best thing you've ever tasted. You cry again. But quietly. You sweep ashes. Mend socks. Stir soups. The manor is quieter. Even the rats seem sluggish. You consider hibernating. Instead, you keep going. Because you are a servant. And the year has one final punch to throw. December. And now it's Christmas. Not the Hallmark version. No sweaters. No cookies. No carolers in matching outfits. This is medieval Christmas. 12 days of feasting. Not for you, of course. For them. You work harder than ever. Cooking. Serving. Cleaning. Scraping. Repeating. Nobles laugh. Minstrels sing. You wash plates the size of cartwheels. Someone vomits in the corner. You mop. But on the last day, just before Epiphany, something magical happens. You get a gift. Maybe a coin. Maybe a candle. Maybe a bit of cloth that isn't itchy and gray. You are allowed to sit by the fire. Drink a little. Sing a carol. Badly. No one yells. For one brief moment, you are seen. You are warm. You are part of something. And then, just as quickly, it's over. You wake up in January. Again. The rooster crows. Again. The cycle begins. Again. But maybe this time, you'll get to keep both shoes. Maybe. Sleep now. You've got a long year ahead. You wake up. Again. Because of course you do. That rooster is basically your life coach now. Its screeching is the soundtrack of your suffering. You've accepted this. You sit up in the straw, careful not to disturb the mice. You wouldn't want to wake them. They're unionized now. Your back creaks. Your joints crackle like damp kindling. Your face is crusted with something. And for the 37th time this year, you think there must be someone worse off than me. Bad news, there is. Good news, also yes. But to know who, we need to take a scenic and deeply sarcastic tour through the pecking order of medieval society. From the top, where people dine on swan and commit casual nepotism, to the very bottom, where you reside, clutching a wooden spoon and crying into a pot of turnips. This is the medieval manor hierarchy. Spoiler, it's not a meritocracy. Let's begin with the people you see least, but suffer under most. The lord of the manor. He has titles. Land. A fur-lined cloak. Possibly a decorative sword he hasn't used since that embarrassing duel incident 10 years ago. His hands are soft. His shoes are clean. He is, in theory, your protector and feudal overlord. In reality, he's mostly just a well-dressed landlord with better food and less gout than average. He holds court, settles disputes, and occasionally remembers your name, usually when you've broken something or died. His days are filled with important tasks like hawking, hunting, taxing, marrying off his daughters, and not plowing fields. He is also the reason you have a curfew, a tithe, a work quota, and no privacy. You think about stabbing him with a turnip peeler. But you don't, because you enjoy being alive. Next up, the Lady of the Manor. She's technically a background character in most official records, but don't be fooled. She's running the show. The lady oversees the household. That means servants, meals, linen stores, guest hospitality, minor medical emergencies, and possibly managing the budget, assuming her husband doesn't gamble it away on Just Again. She's equal parts manager, mother, therapist, and mild threat. She owns more dresses than you own teeth, and her fingernails have never touched actual dirt. You once saw her drop a handkerchief and 3 servants tackled each other to pick it up. You watched from the shadows, folding napkins with existential despair. Still, if she likes you, she might slip you a leftover tart. If she doesn't, she might slip you out the back door and into a river. It's hard to say. Now we descend, gloriously, to the steward. He is the middle manager of feudalism. The steward's job is to keep everything running while making sure no one is too happy. He supervises the manor, collects rents, manages the accounts, and makes long lists of things you haven't finished. He also carries a big ring of keys and jingles ominously when he walks. He doesn't smile. Ever. If he does, it's because you're being reassigned to rat control duty. You once asked for a day off because you had the plague. He said, put some ash on it and keep moving. He lives slightly better than you. Warmer bed, more cheese, fewer fleas. But spiritually, he is dead inside. Just like you. Then there's the bailiff. Sounds fancy, right? He's not. He's basically a glorified enforcer. Think, tax collector with authority issues. The bailiff ensures everyone pays what they owe to the Lord, whether that's money, grain, livestock, or hours of unpaid labor that make your soul rot. He oversees field work, shouts a lot, and wears a hat that suggests he has small dreams and large grudges. If you're late with your quota of turnips, he's there. If your cow dies mysteriously, he's there. If you look even remotely like you might be enjoying something, yep, he's there. He may or may not be literate, but he does carry a stick, and that stick remembers things. Let's switch gears. The house staff. Oh yes, the inner sanctum of nobility. Welcome to the Great Hall, where the privileged few get to wear actual shoes indoors and complain about too much honey in the mead. Start with the butler. No, not the tuxedoed man from Downton Abbey. This butler is more like a beer accountant. He's in charge of the buttery, which stores wine, ale, and that one cask no one's allowed to touch, but somehow always leaks. He's respected. He's trusted. He knows where the good cheese is hidden. If he likes you, you might get a sip of watered-down ale at the end of a 14-hour shift. If he doesn't, you get boiled cabbage water and a friendly shove. Then there's the cook. God help you. The cook runs the kitchen like a battlefield. Pots flying, fires roaring, pigs squealing, someone crying in the corner. This person has scars, burn marks, secrets, and possibly a body buried under the turnip shed. You do not cross the cook, ever. You want to live? Stir the pot counterclockwise and do not ask questions. Beneath the cook, there are kitchen boys, spitjacks, and scullions. That's you, by the way. You're the scullion, the lowest of the low, the gremlin of grease, the mop-wielding, pot-scraping goblin of gruel. You are as essential as you are invisible. You scrub pans so hard you see your reflection, and wish you hadn't. Let's head outside. The reeve is waiting. He's the head peasant, the elected boss of your village. Which sounds cool, except no one wants the job. Because the reeve has to collect taxes, enforce rules, supervise field work, and occasionally tattle to the steward. This makes him the least popular man in a 6-mile radius. He's basically the feudal version of guy who volunteered to organize the group chat and now regrets everything. If the crops fail, it's his fault. If someone steals a chicken, he's blamed. If someone starts a fist fight over butter, again, it's the reeve who has to break it up. He's not a villain, just tired. Like you. So tired. The shepherd lives alone. He's out in the fields for weeks at a time with just his sheep, his dog, and the slow creeping of madness. He returns with a 1,000-yard stare, a new song about mud, and 12 ticks in his tunic. You nod at him. He nods back. You never speak. It's safer that way. The blacksmith is technically a tradesman, so he's above you. but only slightly. He makes tools, shoes horses, repairs plows, and occasionally forges questionable knives that may or may not have been used in bar fights. His forge smells like ash and scorched masculinity. You go there when you need a nail, a hook, or to hide from the cook. He has soot in his beard, arms like tree trunks, and zero patience for nonsense. But if he likes you, he might give you a bent horseshoe for luck. It doesn't work, but it's the thought that counts. And finally, we arrive at you, the servant. You're not a knight. You're not a craftsman. You're not even a proper serf with land and responsibilities. You're a body, a tool, a name no one pronounces right. You clean, cook, lift, stir, fetch, kneel, bow, and get blamed for everything. You sleep on straw, eat on your feet, and pray for a bath every equinox or so. Your life is a blur of tasks and orders. Your pay is a joke. Your dreams are vague. Your feet hurt. But you are everywhere. You make the food. You carry the water. You light the fires. You polish the silver. You pick the herbs. You tend the animals. You sweep the mess. Without you, the manor doesn't function. And you know what? They know that. Which is why they keep you just happy enough not to revolt. But not too happy. Can't have that. So, tomorrow you'll wake up. Again. To the rooster. Again. And you'll serve. Again. Because that's your place in the glorious pyramid of medieval hierarchy. Right near the bottom. Snuggled somewhere between latrine boy and cow assistant. Sleep tight. You've earned it. You wake up. Again. You weren't asleep long. Maybe an hour. 2 if you're lucky. And you're not. You're itchy. Specifically, everything itches. Your scalp. Your back. Your knees. Places that shouldn't itch. Places you didn't even know could itch. Congratulations. You're still alive in the year 1328. And you are disgusting. Not personally. Well, yes, personally, but also structurally. You were born into a world where the concept of hygiene hasn't been invented yet. No soap. No toothbrush. No toothpaste. No showers. No deodorant. No washing machine. No understanding of why germs matter. There is water, but it's full of frogs and regret. You are the olfactory nightmare of a walking history textbook. And here's the best part, so is everyone else. Let's begin with the bathing situation, shall we? Bathing in the medieval world is optional. Encouraged, yes. But only in a kind of do-it-if-you-have-time between surviving and tilling 14 acres sort of way. The rich bathe in big wooden tubs, dragged into their rooms by 6 exhausted servants, filled with water heated pot by pot over a fire that you chopped wood for. You, however, bathe in a river, or a pond, or a bucket, maybe twice a year, maybe. And you're not alone. The river also hosts 3 pigs, 2 geese, a mun peeing, a child crying, and a corpse, probably. Sometimes you throw herbs in. Sage, rosemary, lavender if you're feeling luxurious. Mostly it just smells like wet hay and generational trauma. Your soap, if you have any, is lion animal fat. It burns. But at least you smell less like spoiled cabbage afterward. Temporarily. Very temporarily. Hair? Let's talk about it. Your hair is home to a vibrant ecosystem of lice, fleas, and dreams that never came true. You've tried combing them out. You've tried vinegar. You've tried shouting. Nothing works. The richer households might powder their hair with flour to make it look lighter. You've tried that too. It just turns into a crusty helmet of sadness. Shaving your head is an option. So is wearing a coif, basically a linen head condom that traps the bugs inside, like a self-contained hell dimension. You keep your hair braided or tied back, not for style, but to keep it out of the stew. The cook yells at you otherwise. He has standards. Low ones. But they exist. Now, the mouth. You'd think with all the bad food, you'd have fewer cavities. Wrong. Your diet is 99% starch and 1% things that hurt. Bread, porridge, and dried peas form a paste between your teeth that could probably be used to build cathedrals. To clean your teeth, you might chew on a stick, or rub ashes on them, or rinse with wine. Which sounds great until you realize the wine is room temperature and has floaties. You've got maybe 6 functional teeth left. 1 is loose. 1 is black. One whistles when you breathe. You haven't smiled in weeks. It's safer that way. Let's move on to latrines, also known as medieval horror chambers. You need to relieve yourself. Where do you go? If you live in a castle, there's a garderobe, basically a vertical hole in the wall that empties onto the ground below. You squat. You hope. You aim. You pray the wind isn't blowing the wrong way. If you live in the village, it's a ditch, or the woods, or the alley. If you're rich, someone empties your chamber pot for you. If you're you empty the chamber pot. It sloshes. It spills. It gets on your shoes. Your shoes were made of wool and sadness, and now they're full of human waste. Again. And the smell? Imagine boiled eggs, rotting onions, a wet dog, and betrayal. Now set it on fire. That's the smell. That's your life. Now let's talk about illness. Because you're never not sick. Just degrees of sick. Headache? That's the plague coming for you. Fever? That's the sweating sickness. Enjoy. Cough? Tuberculosis. Congratulations. Bloody stool? Who knows? Everything is bloody stool. Healthcare in the medieval world is not care. It's more of a hopeful guessing game. There are 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you have too much of one, the doctor might drain it out. Literally. Feeling lethargic? You're clearly overblooded. Time for leeches. The barber surgeon arrives. He's part stylist, part butcher, part horrifying mystery man with knives. He might shave your beard. He might amputate your foot. You lie on the table. No anesthesia. No gloves. No antiseptic. He mutters something about bad air and begins to saw. You scream. He tells you to bite this stick. You bite. He saws. You pass out. Wake up later. Missing a limb. Still charged full price. If you're lucky, someone calls the local wise woman. She's got potions, herbs, salves, a poultice made of moss and hope. She blows on your forehead, mumbles in Latin, rubs your feet with garlic. Somehow, you feel better. The priest says it's witchcraft. You don't care. Your rash is gone. Let's talk about the most terrifying medical treatment of them all: trepanation. Got a headache? Depression? Unbalanced humors? They drill a hole in your skull. Just open your head up. Let the demons out. No painkillers. No antiseptic. Just a chunk of sharpened iron and a lot of faith. Sometimes you live. Sometimes you don't. Either way, the headache's gone. So, that's something. You wake up the next morning. You're not better. But you're not dead. Which, by medieval standards, is a win. You blow your nose into your sleeve, of course. It crunches. You don't ask questions. You scratch at a boil. It leaks something. You name it Bernard. You step outside. The air smells like smoke, pigs, and human despair. But also bread. The baker's up. Maybe today will be different. Maybe your cough will stop. Maybe the itching will ease. Maybe the cook will share a carrot. Maybe not. But you're alive. Covered in filth, fleas, and spiritual decay, but alive. And that's what passes for health in the 14th century. You wake up. Not because you've had enough rest. No, that would be far too luxurious. You wake up because your stomach is making sounds like an angry goat in a sack. You're starving. Again. You were starving yesterday. You'll be starving tomorrow. But right now, you are extremely aware of how empty your belly is. You know that if you don't get food soon, you'll be forced to chew on the corner of your own sleeve. Again. You've done it before. Well, doesn't taste like much. But it's better than boiled nettles and existential dread. Welcome to the medieval servant's diet, a low-calorie, high-suffering lifestyle made possible by feudalism, famine, and poor planning. You are about to consume your daily ration of bland, beige, peasant-friendly cuisine, a steaming bowl of gruel that tastes like hot wallpaper paste and sadness. It's Monday. You think. Which means barley. Maybe oat. Or it might be last Friday's oat. No one's sure anymore. The cook just keeps adding water. And stirring. Forever. Let's talk about gruel. The single most consistent thing in your diet, your paycheck, and your dreams. Gruel is what happens when you boil cereal grains in water until it turns into something vaguely edible. It's not porridge. Porridge has ambition. Gruel has given up. It's gray. It's thin. It has the texture of regret and the color of apathy. You eat it with a wooden spoon that splinters on contact. Sometimes there are lumps. You don't ask what they are. Sometimes it's sweetened, not for you, of course. That's for people who know what honey tastes like. For you, it's gruel with a side of maybe salt and occasional weevils for protein. Now, if it's a good day, you might get bread. Not bread like you know it. Not soft, warm, fluffy bread that comes in slices and smells like your childhood. No, this is medieval bread. It's dense. It's dark. It's sour. It's made from rye or barley or whatever was lying on the floor. It's hard enough to chip a tooth and chewy enough to qualify as an arm workout. Some of the worst bread is horse bread made from beans, peas, and acorns. It's technically food. So is bark. So is desperation. You scrape off the mold. Or you don't. It builds character. If it's extra stale, you dip it in your gruel and pretend it's flavor. If you're really desperate, you eat the trencher, a slab of stale bread that acts as your plate. It's soaked with meat juices and disappointment from someone else's meal. You eat it anyway. That's protein. Probably. Now, what about vegetables? Ah yes. Nature's beige. You've got cabbage, leeks, turnips, onions, things that grow easily and taste like earth. They're boiled into oblivion and served as something called pottage, which is basically peasant stew. It includes water, vegetables, maybe a bone, maybe your will to live. It's boiled so long that everything turns the same color. A sort of beige-brown-gray hybrid that defies description. It smells like swamp. You eat it slowly, because there's no second helping. Meat? You laugh. Oh, sweet child. You don't get meat. Meat is for nobles, lords, feast days, or extremely lucky rodents. You might get bits of meat, cartilage, necks, ears, giblets. You might get fish on Fridays if the church says so, but it's dried, salted, and tastes like despair preserved in brine. Once, a noble gave you a goosefoot. You still think about that day. You know who gets meat? The rich. They dine on boar, venison, swan, roast pheasant, and mysterious pies that may or may not contain actual food. They throw feasts with 12 courses and entire roast animals carried in by servants like you, whose only reward is the smell. You once saw a noble not finish a slice of meat. You made eye contact with it. You cried. So where do you get most of your calories? 2 places. Ale and beans. Ale is safer than water. It's weak, flat, and always slightly warm. You drink it all day. It doesn't get you drunk. It just keeps you hydrated enough to keep suffering. Beans? They're plentiful. They're cheap. They keep you full and extremely flatulent. The servants' quarters at night sound like a sack of geese fighting a drum kit. You learn to live with it. You learn to sleep through it. Mostly. Let's pause to talk about feast days. Feast days are your one shot at real food. They're church-sanctioned days of gluttony where, if the stars align and the steward forgets to check the pantry, you might actually taste something with fat in it. Maybe even honey. Or an egg. Or a strip of bacon. You eat so much you get sick. You regret nothing. Then it's back to gruel and cabbage water. Until the next holy day. In 3 months. Did you know there are entire laws about what you can eat? They're called sumptuary laws, and they say that only certain people can eat certain foods. You, being dirt poor and questionably alive, are not allowed spices, fancy pastries, white bread, or fine cheeses. Even if you find it. Even if someone gives it to you. Even if the Lord drops it on the floor and it rolls to your foot, technically, you're supposed to give it back. You don't. You pretend you didn't see it. You eat it in the outhouse with your hand over your mouth. It tastes like heaven. And sawdust. What about sweets? You dream of them. Sugar exists, but only for the rich. You've never seen it. Rumor has it it's white, magical, and addictive. You once tasted honey. It stuck in your teeth for 3 days. You'd marry a bee to taste it again. Now let's talk about hunger. It's not an event. It's a background noise. A constant hum in your belly that makes you lightheaded when you stand up too fast. You're always just slightly empty. It sharpens your senses, dulls your thoughts, and makes you do questionable things with stale bread. When there's a bad harvest, and there's always a bad harvest, it gets worse. The village stores run low. People start getting creative. You eat acorns, roots, bark, leather, You once chewed a bootlace for 3 hours. It tasted like hope. You dream of food often. Meat that falls off the bone. Pies that steam when cut open. Loaves of bread you don't have to fight with. You wake up chewing air. Sometimes you cry. Then you go outside and scrape more turnips from the mud. And the cycle begins again. And that's the servant's diet. Gruel, beans, bread, cabbage, regret. A never-ending parade of bland sustenance just good enough to keep you alive and miserable. Your stomach rumbles again. You look down into your bowl. It's half full. You smile. You've had worse. You take a bite. It's warm. Today is a good day. You wake up because someone just rolled over on top of you. That's how privacy works when you're a servant in the 14th century. It doesn't. You sleep in the corner of the kitchen or in the hayloft or next to 5 other equally overworked bodies jammed onto a pallet that smells like mildew and questionable intentions. It's not romantic. It's not private. It's not clean. But it is, occasionally, intimate. Because you're human. And humans, even half-starved, lice-ridden, exhausted ones, still crave connection. Sometimes even affection. Or at the very least, a warm body that hasn't coughed blood in the last 48 hours. So before you swipe right on your fellow scullery maid or wink at the stable boy, let's explore what courtship looks like when you don't have soap, shoes, or any free time. Dating as a servant is a full-contact sport. There's no tavern night, no candlelit stroll, no late-night texting. There's barely a moment between dawn and collapse where you can talk to someone, let alone flirt. But you find ways. You steal a moment behind the well. You brush hands while kneading dough. You share a stale crust of bread under the stairs. Someone says your eyes are the color of barley. You swoon. Your standards are so low they're practically subterranean. Still, it's something. Now, flirting in the medieval servant class is subtle. There's eye contact. Not too much. There are compliments. You carry that pail of slop with such elegance. There's poetry, if you're lucky. If not, there's whistling and lewd jokes about turnips. If things go really well, you get a flower. A wild one. Wilted. You press it between the pages of your one shared prayer book, next to the Psalms. And just like that, you're courting. But don't get too excited. Because love among the servant class is tangled up with property, power, and very nosy employers. You can't just go off and marry someone. That's adorable. You need permission. From your lord. Or your master. Sometimes even the church. Marriage is considered a contract. And you, as a servant, are valuable property. If you get married, someone has to approve of your life choices. Usually someone who wears nicer shoes than you. Sometimes they say yes. Sometimes they say, no, you belong to the laundry now. And that's that. Still, some couples do manage to get married. There's no white dress. No cake. No first dance. There is a ceremony, a blessing, and maybe some stale bread to celebrate. You hold hands. You exchange vows. And then, probably in a stable or behind a barn, you consummate. Romantic? Not really. Necessary? Absolutely. It's your best shot at forming a legal union, one the law and the Lord both recognize, and one that might slightly improve your odds of not dying alone in a pig trough. Of course, not everyone gets married. Because let's be honest, sex happens anyway. And sometimes, it's not great. There's no privacy, no contraception, no sexual education. You fumble. You hope. You pray to Saint Valentine that nothing itches afterward. But you're also extremely bored and chronically undertouched. So yeah, things happen. Behind haystacks. In kitchens. In the shadow of a chapel. And here's the real kicker. Having sex outside of marriage is illegal. No, really. It's called fornication, and you can be fined, whipped, or publicly shamed for it. There are church courts, actual courts, where people confess their carnal sins. You stand before a priest and explain why you were caught with your trousers down in the granary. He frowns. You cry. You pay a fine that costs more than your yearly wages. Meanwhile, your partner skips town. Classic. Now let's say you get pregnant. Oh no. You're unmarried. You're poor. You're exhausted. And now, you're growing, a tiny medieval human. Your options? Hope the father marries you. Hope the church doesn't notice. Hope the baby doesn't die. Spoiler, statistically, it probably will. Illegitimate children are labeled bastards, and their lives are not easy. They can't inherit. They're often sent off to monasteries or apprenticed out young. Sometimes they live with shame. Sometimes they live with you in the servant quarters. Sometimes they don't live long at all. And you? You're marked. Once a loose woman, always a loose woman. Even if you were never given a choice. Meanwhile, married life for servants isn't exactly sweet either. You both work 14-hour days, barely see each other, sleep next to 4 other people, and argue about who forgot to boil the cabbage. Romance? Gone. Sex? Rare. Cuddling? You're too sweaty. Still, sometimes, there's companionship. You share food. You laugh about the Lord's ridiculous hat. You survive. Together. And that counts for something. And then there's adultery. Let's say your master's wife is very friendly. Or the Lord has taken an interest in the new chambermaid. Power is lopsided. Consent is complicated. Sometimes it's forced. Sometimes it's transactional. Either way, it happens all the time. You, the servant, get the blame. You're fired. Or worse, punished. They get a new cloak. You get another fine from the church. Love, it turns out, is rarely fair. Especially when you're the one scrubbing floors for a living. Let's not forget about same-sex relationships. They exist. Always have. But in medieval Europe, they're illegal, dangerous, and rarely acknowledged in public. Still, stories survive of close friendships, of passionate letters, of 2 women buried side by side, forever companions. You learn to read the silences. You learn to live quietly. You find comfort where you can, even if history pretends you didn't. And what about love stories? Are there any? Actually, yes. A servant and a blacksmith's daughter who run away together. A washerwoman who saves enough to buy her freedom and marries her childhood sweetheart. A stableboy and a kitchen maid who grow old, wrinkled, and irritable together, always arguing, always in love. These stories are rare, but they're real. And when you're kneeling over a fire or hauling a bucket of pig guts, they keep you going. Because even in the darkest corners of the manor, even under the weight of class and labor and chronic dysentery, love still finds a way. Usually badly. Sometimes beautifully. Always messily. You curl up under your blanket of straw and stolen laundry. Someone's breathing nearby. It's warm. You close your eyes. You dream of better days, sweeter kisses, and bread that isn't hard enough to kill 'em on. Maybe someday. Maybe next life. You wake up. Because someone is whispering. Again. At first, you think it's a dream. But then you realize it's Agnes, again, muttering to Lettuce about how someone has been sneaking extra scraps from the buttery. She says someone, but she's looking directly at you. With that smug, I wear a clean apron twice a week energy. You pretend to keep sleeping. You are now a suspect in the petty crime of theft by crust. Welcome to the world of medieval servant gossip. It's like Twitter, but with more lice and fewer boundaries. In a world where you own nothing, sleep little, and wash even less, your reputation is everything. And gossip is the medieval version of currency, clout, and blackmail, all rolled into one steaming pile of verbal manure. No matter how low on the feudal ladder you are, there's always someone one rung below you can talk trash about. And you do. Constantly. Gossip travels through the manor house like fleas on a dog. It starts in the kitchens. The cook says the steward has been sneaking pastries at night, again. Then it moves to the scullery, where Edith swears she saw the lady of the house cry into her turnip mash last Tuesday. By the time it gets to the stables, it's become a full-blown scandal about an affair between the steward, the lady, and the pastry. You, meanwhile, are scrubbing laundry, and somehow everyone now thinks you're pregnant. You're not. You just stood up too fast and burped. And now it's canon. Servant gossip has rules. Unspoken ones. You may whisper, but never when the Lord is nearby. You may speculate, but never about the priest. He hears everything. Probably from God. You may accuse, but always with plausible deniability. I heard it from someone who saw it themselves. You may be the subject of gossip today, the spreader tomorrow, and the accidental witness to a barn tryst by Friday. Roles rotate quickly. 1 minute, you're laughing about Marjorie's missing shoe. The next, everyone's saying you cursed it off her foot. Because yes, witchcraft is a thing. And it is shockingly easy to accuse someone of it. Especially if they own a cat, have too many moles, or talk to plants. Or, and this is a big one, they just don't like people. Which, fair. Let's pause to talk about the power of secrets. Servants see everything. You think lords and ladies get privacy? Please. You, the servant, are in the room when the knight comes back bloodied and muttering. You're in the hallway when the lady and her confessor have a very long conversation behind a curtain. You're cleaning the sheets. You know things. You know who drinks too much wine, who cries after Massachusetts, who argues about dowries, who hasn't paid the miller. And if you're smart, and you are, you learn to keep the good secrets to yourself. Until you need something, like new shoes, or protection, or to not be fired when the goose goes missing. Now, sometimes gossip is harmless. I heard you the stab Leboe sings to the horses. Heard Thomas has fleas again. Pretty sure that lump on Lettuce's neck is a devil's mark. You know, normal stuff. But sometimes, it turns dark. Let's say someone accuses you of stealing from the Lord's pantry. You didn't. But someone's cousin said someone else saw you standing near a pie. That's all it takes. You're whipped, or dismissed, or sent to the church courts, where you get fined an entire year's wages for a plum you didn't even eat. Gossip kills. Not metaphorically. Literally. And what about betrayal? Oh, betrayal is delicious. Let's say your best friend in the servant quarters, we'll call her Alice, finds out that you've been secretly meeting the steward behind the grain bins. She's jealous. Naturally. So she casually tells the cook, who casually tells the butler, who casually tells the lady of the house. And now you're fired. And Alice gets your job. And you're caught. And your leftover crust of honeyed oatcake. You see her that night, wearing your old apron like it fits her better. You do not cry. You curse her linen. Softly. Now, not all gossip is malicious. Some of it is bonding. After all, you're all trapped in the same hierarchy. Same blistered feet. Same boiling cauldrons of cabbage. Sometimes you gossip because it's the only entertainment you have. There's no Netflix. No Tavern Nights. No medieval Love Island. There's just Agnes and her never-ending stories about how she once served a bishop who smelled like death and mint. You listen. You laugh. You exaggerate a bit and pass it on. By the time it reaches the granary, the bishop's now the pope. And he exploded. There are some gossip classics. Like, the lady of the house is sleeping with her cousin. The priest has a secret child. The miller is using rat flour again. The Lord's new sword is actually just painted wood. Some of them are probably true. Some aren't. No one cares. You repeat them anyway because they distract you from your sore knees and endless churning of butter. And then there are servant alliances. Small cliques that form for protection. You help Edith clean the linens, she covers for you when you're late to chapel. You warn John the footman that the steward's in a mood, and he shares his piece of dried apple with you at supper. These alliances are delicate, sacred, and if someone breaks them, you don't forget. Forgiveness is for saints. You are not a saint. You are a peasant with vengeance and a long memory. Let's talk eavesdropping. You've gotten good at it. You know exactly where to stand in the hallway to hear the ladies whisper. You know how to carry a tray without making a sound. You know how to stir a pot while listening to the steward yell about tax payments and the missing chicken. You know how to learn without ever being seen. And you collect these details like precious stones. Someday, one might buy your silence, or your safety, or your escape. One servant once heard a secret, a real one, about the Lord's debts. He sold that secret to a traveling merchant. And now, he's gone. No one knows where he went. Or maybe they do. But no one's saying. You tell that story in the laundry room. As a warning. And as a fantasy. At night, when the manor is quiet and the mice are louder than the people, you lie in the dark, surrounded by snoring and the occasional suspicious rustling. You think about what you know. Who kissed whom? Who stole the eggs? Who's planning to run away? Who's going to get caught? And you smile. Because tomorrow, the whole manor might be buzzing with another scandal. And you'll already know the ending. You wake up. Your head hurts. Your joints ache. Your throat feels like you gargled gravel. and your left eye is leaking something that is definitely not normal. But you still have to work, because you're a servant in the 1300s, and unless your actual soul is leaving your body, nobody cares that you're sick. Work must go on. Laundry must be done. Floors must be scrubbed. Chickens must be chased. So you drag yourself out of your straw mattress, step barefoot into something wet again, and begin another glorious day of probably dying from something preventable. Let's talk hygiene, or more accurately, the lack thereof. Your bath schedule? Once a month, if you're lucky. Once a season, if you're not. Soap? Made from ash and animal fat. Toothbrush? You wish. Toothpaste? You chew mint leaves and pray. Deodorant? Not invented. The only thing masking your body odor is the slightly worse body odor of everyone else around you. Clothes? Washed weekly. Maybe. Dried over smoke. Infested with lice. Never changed unless absolutely necessary, like a rat chewed through it necessary. In other words, your body is a petri dish. Congratulations. Now, when you start feeling ill, your first step is denial. Maybe it's just fatigue. Maybe you're just cold. Maybe your spleen isn't rotting yet. So you go to the village-wise woman, a vaguely mystical older woman with a mole, a hawk-like nose, and the ability to make tea that smells like fear. She peers at you with squinted eyes and says, "Your humors are unbalanced." You nod. You pretend to know what that means. She gives you a drink made of yarrow root, pickled turnip water, and something she calls blessed thistle. It tastes like regret. You drink it anyway, because the alternative is visiting the barber surgeon, and that man owns 4 knives and 0 qualifications. Let's review the humors, the medieval theory of health that absolutely does not make any sense, but will dictate your entire treatment plan. There are 4. Blood, hot and wet. Phlegm, cold and wet. Yellow bile, hot and dry. Black bile, cold and dry. Feeling sluggish? Too much phlegm. Feeling angry? Too much yellow bile. Having night terrors? You're full of black bile. Literally every symptom can be explained by the humors, which is impressive, considering they are completely made up. But nobody tells you that, because science won't be invented for another 300 years. Let's say your fever gets worse. You're sweating, hallucinating, speaking in tongues. That's when the leeches come out. Or, if your village can't afford those, a nice old woman just cuts your arm and lets you drip into a bowl. That's called bloodletting, and it is somehow the go-to treatment for absolutely everything. Cough? Bloodletting. Back pain? Bloodletting. Diarrhea? You guessed it, more bloodletting. The theory is simple. If something's wrong inside your body, obviously the solution is to remove a large amount of blood until you either feel better or pass out. Or die. Either way, the problem is technically gone. Now let's say you've developed a rash. Bright. Red. Itchy. Possibly screaming. You show it to your fellow servants. One says it's fleas. Another says it's demons. The priest says you've been consorting with sin. The cook tells you to rub it with garlic and bury a chicken foot under your bed. You try all of these. Nothing works. You accept that your skin is now permanently on fire. You keep scrubbing pots anyway. Sometimes, the illness is mental. You feel sad, empty, tired in a way that sleep can't fix. You don't have words for this. Nobody does. There is no concept of depression, or burnout, or chronic anxiety. There's just the melancholy. People say you need sunlight, or to pray harder, or to sleep with a religious relic under your tongue. Sometimes they say you're possessed, which is comforting, especially when the suggested cure is a spontaneous exorcism in the barn at midnight with 3 nuns and a bell. You go along with it, because it's that or keep crying into the pig trough. Now, some diseases are very real, and very horrifying. Let's list some of your greatest hits. Cholera, explosive diarrhea until your organs dehydrate. Dysentery, like cholera, but with more blood and screams. Tuberculosis, coughing fits, night sweats, and slew, poetic death. Typhoid, headache, fever, delirium, and spontaneous death in the garden. St. Anthony's fire, caused by moldy rye bread, makes your limbs feel like they're burning off. Sometimes they do. The Black Death, you already know. Buboes. Fever. Death in 72 hours. Cool plague mask eye optional. And the best part? Most of these are preventable by modern standards. But you're not in modernity. You're in a house full of rats, bad plumbing, and no germ theory. So instead, you sleep next to the guy who has full body sores and hope your immune system is feeling lucky. Now, let's say you survive your illness. Congrats. You're now scarred, partially blind, or slightly insane. Maybe you limp. Maybe you can't see out of your left eye anymore. Maybe you've developed a tic that makes people think you're cursing a god. Either way, you're back to work within a day of standing. Because you're a servant, and resting is a luxury for people with actual mattresses and no debt. Let's not forget superstition. Sick? Maybe it's a curse. Someone looked at you wrong. Someone left a broom upside down. You walked past a nun backwards on a Tuesday. Boom. You're cursed. Cure? Burn sage. Wash with frog spit. Rub an egg on your forehead. Then bury the egg. Then spit on the egg. You do this. Nothing improves. But now your bed smells like boiled poultry and shame. The church also gets involved. You go to the priest. He gives you a relic, maybe a bone fragment, maybe a fake tooth from a long-dead bishop. He tells you to repent. You do. You confess to things you haven't done. Just in case. You light candles. You whisper prayers. You sleep on the floor of the chapel, hoping that holy proximity will chase away the disease. You wake up. Still sick. But now you have a guilt complex and a sore back. Progress? If things get really bad, like buboes and vomit and hallucinating your own funeral bad, they isolate you. They take you to a leper house or pest house outside the village. You lie there with others like you, wrapped in cloth, rotting slowly, surrounded by buzzing flies and the overwhelming scent of vinegar and despair. You look up at the sky and think, at least I'm not doing dishes. Then you cough up something purple and rethink your optimism. But not everything is doom. Sometimes, you get better. Sometimes, the wise woman's tea works. Sometimes, you just needed sleep. Or time. Or fewer rats in the pantry. You return to work, slower now, but alive. People look at you differently. Some with pity. Some with fear. Some with admiration. Because in a world where death rides daily in the air like wood smoke, surviving is heroic. You survived. That's something. Now curl up in your straw mat, wrapped in a blanket that smells vaguely of garlic, smoke, and healing. Your fever has broken. Your humors are balanced. Your blood is slightly reduced but no longer gushing. Sleep comes. Soft and slow. You dream of a world with medicine, dentists, and the concept of germs. But until then, there's parsley tea, wishful thinking, and a whole lot of hope. You earn a wage. Technically. That's what the contract says, if there's a contract at all. More likely, it was a muttered agreement made in a smoky alehouse after 2 cups of weak mead and a handshake from a man who smelled like damp parchment and animal grease. You're promised, let's say, 10 shillings a year. Sounds fancy, right? Shiny coins. A whole 10 of them. Now let's break that down. 1 shilling is worth 12 pence. So 10 shillings? That's 120 pence for the whole year. 365 days. Around 3 pence a week. Less than half a penny a day. And you thought minimum wage was bad. So where does your money go? Oh, my sweet naive peasant. First off, you don't get paid weekly or monthly. Oh no. Wages are annual, paid at the end of the service year if you stay the whole time and don't annoy your master and he remembers and isn't dead of plague. If you quit early, nothing. If you're fired for coughing wrong, nothing. If your lord forgets, tough luck. That's assuming you even get going. Because many lords pay in kind, which is noble-sounding code for useless household garbage. You might be compensated with a pair of woolen hose, usually itchy and flea-infested. Some used shoes with a questionable stain. Leftover scraps from the lord's table. A bucket of barley. 1 turnip. Congratulations. You're now the proud owner of edible inflation. You don't really spend money. Because you don't have any. What you do have is debt. Let's say you get sick, which you always do. You owe the wise woman 2 eggs and a rabbit foot for her healing tea. You borrow a knife from a cook. Now you owe him a favor. Probably something terrifying. You need to repair your boots? That'll cost a candle, a chunk of salt, and your pride. Want to marry? Dowries aren't just for noble daughters. Even peasant girls expect a token gift. So you owe someone's father 3 chickens and a promise not to die immediately. Debt builds quietly, like mold in your bed straw. It creeps in, gets comfortable, and never leaves. Now, let's imagine you're one of the lucky ones. You serve a wealthy manor. Your master is only mildly tyrannical. You've survived the harvest. You weren't trampled by a cart. At the end of the year, you receive actual money. A silver coin warm from your master's sweaty hand. You stare at it. It stares back, slightly insulted. What can you buy with this shining miracle of finance? Let's explore the economic buffet of medieval servant shopping. A pair of leather shoes? A full week's wage. A simple linen shift? Another week's wage. A mug of small ale? A penny, which is 1/3 of your daily earnings. A loaf of rye bread? Also a penny. Hope you weren't thirsty. A candle? Half a penny. Better ration that light. You quickly learn that survival costs more than your job pays. If you save every single coin, no ale, no food beyond your rations, no repairs, no indulgences, you might be able to buy a goat after 10 years. And the goat is probably diseased. But at least now you have milk and an emotional support animal. Now let's talk about the other kind of wealth, theft. Oh yes, servant steal. Because when you work 16-hour days cleaning vomit out of rushes and your lord forgets to pay you for the 3rd year in a row, you stop seeing his spoons as property and start seeing them as retirement. You pocket a candlestick here, a bolt of cloth there, bread crusts, chicken bones, soap. It's not noble. But then again, neither is dying of scurvy while your master drinks imported wine. But if you're caught, punishment varies from public whipping to being fired to, in some delightful cases, having your hands cut off. That's medieval HR for you. There's also tipping culture. Yes, medieval tipping. When guests visit the manor, they're expected to tip the servants who fetch their horses, carry their baggage, or refill their wine. Tips range from a farthing, which is 1/4 of a penny, and yes, that was a coin, to a full silver penny if the guest is drunk or generous or both. You live for these moments. Because one drunk night with a loose purse string can double your annual wage in one visit. It's like working in a medieval casino, but with fewer coins and more hay allergies. Now let's climb the social ladder a bit. Say you're a senior servant, a steward, a bailiff, the guy who orders the other guys around. You're still a servant, yes. But you might earn enough to own, wait for it, a chair, a wooden one, with a back, luxury. You can afford candles, maybe your own mug. You can drink ale with a handle. And at Christmas, you receive the ultimate symbol of status, a coin with a king's head on it, and you get to keep it instead of giving it straight to your master. Of course, your job now includes managing grain taxes, punishing runaway workers, and counting chickens that mysteriously vanish every 3rd Tuesday. So you're rich, but also stressed, hated, and probably dying of ulcers. Welcome to middle management. Some servants turn to moonlighting, working a second job during evenings or holidays. Popular options include spinning wool for extra coin, brewing ale in secret, mending clothes, telling fortunes, selling stolen goose eggs. But there's a catch: most lords forbid outside work. You belong to the household. Your labor is not yours to sell. So you work in secret, in barn by candlelight, with someone watching the door while you sew an entire doublet in 30 minutes using nothing but a bone needle and rage. And if all else fails, you run away. Yes, servant flight was a thing. You vanish in the night. You change your name. You walk to a new village, claim to be from somewhere east, and pray no one recognizes your accent or that weird limp you have. But word spreads fast. Town criers announce names of runaway servants like they're medieval wanted posters. If you're caught, back to your master. Possibly with a whipping. Definitely with a wage reduction. But if you're lucky, you start over. New manor. New job. New set of lice. You live in hope. And cold, scratchy wool. Now let's say you want to stop being a servant. You dream of freedom. Maybe owning land. Having a small cottage. A pig. A spouse with all their teeth. It's possible. But only barely. You'll need years of saving. Luck. A wealthy relative. Or a miracle involving a dead uncle and an inheritance no one expected. Most servants stay servants their whole lives. Some get married. Some become parents. Some eventually inherit a patch of land and upgrade from servant to peasant, which is like going from unpaid intern to part-time sandwich artist. It's an improvement, technically. So tonight, as you lie in your bed of straw and future back pain, you reflect on your finances. You earned 120 pence. You spent 119 of them on food, bribes, and soap. You have 1 penny left. You hide it in your shoe. You dream of goats. You dream of ale. You dream of a warm hearth, a clean shirt, and not owing your soul to the turnip dealer down the road. But for now, you sleep. You're broke. You're tired. But at least you didn't die of debt-related exposure. Yet.